Hey, what's going on, everyone? Apologies for running a little bit late again. For some reason, like no matter what time of the day I start, I always end up having to rush to these 1 p.m. Central Time lives. So I'll just wait a little bit for people to jump in, and then we'll go from there. I'm kind of taking some notes here, and we will rock and roll. Okay, that works. Okay, all right. So the main thing I wanted to focus on today is actually biohacking that actually will work to make your skin look good, to give you good body composition, to give you good metabolic health markers, et cetera, et cetera. And I know in America, like medical drug culture, symptom management culture is so common. So this topic definitely goes under the radar. But I'm a huge believer that the only way to be healthy is to be healthy and happy, you know? I rarely, minus car accidents and stuff of this sort, I rarely see people that are healthy and happy needing like a myriad of medical drugs. I think this whole entire peptide trend now online is like very scammy too. It's kind of like the next get rich quick scheme of health and fitness. And I think it's just important for us to return back to like real healthcare. And of course, if you guys have any questions at all about any other topics, like even if they're not related to our live today, I'm happy to answer them. But what I wanted to cover today is like biohacking that actually works. Okay. And biohacking community, I think like minus just some very minor exceptions, almost lottery chance winning of 1 in a million is very scammy. And a lot of biohacking is doesn't do anything. It doesn't work, and people are kind of like naive and foolish and always looking for like the quick fix, But I got this saying from one of my friends, and if all those quick fixes worked, we would all be fixed by now, especially in America where medical drug culture is just so common. Like everyone is pretty much on medical drugs, but yet Americans remain mentally and physically the sickest humans in all of human history. And I think the main reason, and there are a couple of reasons, but the main reason is we're so far detached from what being mentally and physically healthy is even anymore in this country. With I mention these stats often, but I think it's important to get people out of this problem unaware stage. 9 out of 10 Americans are metabolically sick at the moment, with 70% obese and 85% either overweight or obese. And I think like 70 to 80%, depending on the sources you cite, on some type of medical drug, and like maybe close to 30% are on some type of psychiatric drug. And in terms of the psychiatric drugs, those are just the people that could actually afford to get a diagnosis and get treated. So that's 30%. But imagine all of the huge percentage that can't afford it. I would easily say, comfortably, it's probably even higher than this, but comfortably say 50% of Americans are mentally unwell, like to clinical levels, like mentally very sick. And these are the people you're kind of like working near and depending on a promotion, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not a good place to be. So I'm going to return back to real healthcare about how to make people actually healthy and happy, because that's how it all started before all these pills and medical drugs and peptides and steroids and druggy influencers came to be, kind of fooling people to think that they can drug themselves into a life of health and happiness. And it just never happens. It never happens. And in fact, the more, Lisa, what is going on? Eric, good to see you as well. In fact, the more medical drugs someone is on, take a good look at them, the worse they seem to look and feel. So like, what the heck's going on, So I'm going to go down the list of 8 to 9 things. These aren't in any hierarchy of importance. Some of them may be important to others, et cetera, et cetera. But a small caveat is just remember this, guys. Before following anyone's advice online, and I say this often as well, just know like they never met you personally and they don't know your specific situation. So if they happen to be like very competent, which is very rare, and not just clickbaiting, fear mongering, social media BS, to get your clicks and likes and kind of rage bait, etc., etc. They don't know your situation personally, and you need to get like a thorough assessment, which usually lasts around 3 to 4 hours, not a quick 5-minute doctor visit, to thoroughly know what is going on in your external and internal environment and the details of your core values and your specific goals and what needs to happen to successfully get you to where you want to be without guessing and in a streamlined way as well. So that's what needs to happen. So the stuff I'm mentioning here is stuff that I use with my clients, give or take, depending on their situation. And of course, I've thoroughly assessed my clients before giving them anything. Usually my assessments last around 3 to 4 hours minimum. And that's for relatively healthy individuals. So keep that in mind, okay? So let's get started. Again, if you guys have any questions, Derek, welcome to live. Just let me know. We're covering biohacking that actually works, doesn't require medical drugs, doesn't require you to buy expensive supplements, and doesn't require peptides, all of which are coming from China and regulated by God knows who, And a lot of these druggy influencers have zero clue about the long-term side effects of any of these peptides. So be careful who you listen to. Because if they knew how to be happy and healthy, why would they need all these steroids and drugs and stuff of that sort? It's super silly. And if you listen to, sick healthcare professionals, don't expect to be healthy yourself or find an honest solution of how to be healthy yourself. But if, of course, you want to be on medical drugs and steroids and stuff of that sort, then you know where to find these people. So first biohack that works. Doesn't require medical drugs, doesn't require prescription, doesn't require peptides, is find out how to free up your time. And I know this is so silly and so common, but a lot of people waste so much time. In fact, I urge you guys to check your phone right now and go to the settings and see how many hours per day or per week you spend cruising around various social media platforms. On average, it's about 20 hours per week, okay? So one of the biggest biohacks that actually works is to free up your time so you have more of that time to dedicate to your workouts, to sleeping more, to maybe just not doing anything, etc., etc. And that would be like a huge health upgrade in and of itself. And I know this is so obvious and a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I get that. And a lot of the stuff I'm actually going to mention here is kind of very easy to understand at an intellectual level. Like a little child can understand this stuff, but the question is, are you really doing it? And that's the most important part, because like they say, power isn't in knowledge, it's in applied knowledge, so are you actually applying these things? So one thing that would really help a lot of people, especially like if you don't have an online business, like just delete all of the social media apps on your phone, but keep them, if you like to stay in touch with friends or whatever, keep them on your desktop or your laptop. Just that alone will dramatically decrease your usage by God knows how many hours. I would say maybe easily 10 hours, if not more, probably realistically 20 hours. I think the average person probably spends cumulatively maybe like 5 to 8 hours a day on social media across all the platforms. And that's not considering also like if they're watching the news, etc., which is also very wasteful and stuff of that sort. So that alone, it's very easy, it doesn't require any money, and it frees up your time gargantuously. And I say this because in order to, I'm not talking about you're going to be like an Olympian, but in order to look your best, to feel your best, have good metabolic health markers, like for example, good body fat percentage, good blood pressure, good triglycerides, good resting blood glucose, good HDL, good testosterone, etc. In order to have these things in place, in order to look your best, have good skin, have energy, have vitality, have a good sex drive, all you need is, I would say realistically, like 8 to 10 hours a week of invested time, and that's it. And that's really broken down into 4 to 5 hours of working out, using movement as medicine, whatever that may be for you, and then 4 to 5 hours of kind of background things, like grocery shopping, preparing your meals, maybe taking naps, et cetera, or meditation sessions or whichever. But it's 8 to 10 hours. So you have to kind of ask yourself, what's more important for you? Because with a full-time job, let's say you're working 40 hours a week, most people, especially with the commute included, it's more like 50 hours a week. Once you include that 40 to 50 hour work week plus 20 hours on social media, that's like 70 hours, 60 to 70 hours total per week. That doesn't leave you with much time or energy or bandwidth, because social media is kind of like a little drama circle for the most part, Of course, it just depends on who you follow, etc. But, there's a lot of like news BS. And of course, people are like really fixated on, like this party's good, that party's good. But if you kind of understand the political landscape, and you'll just realize that neither party really cares that much about you, or there's a lot of gray. It's not so black and white, but it's usually like negative and very emotionally charged, which not only takes bandwidth and attention away from your mental and physical health goals, but also just could charge you up too, and leave you feeling fairly negative, et cetera, et cetera. And the other thing with social media too is news. I mean, guys, unless you're like, gonna go volunteer in Ukraine or Iran, or deal with this immigration issue, whether you're pro-immigration or anti-immigration, whatever. I'm not taking any political stance here, but unless you're actually gonna go do something, there's no point of you gathering that information, because it doesn't have anything to do with your core values personally, So let's say you spent 100 hours or even 50 hours a month following some kind of news event, you know what I mean? And you're just sitting on your couch, and you're literally not going to take any action whatsoever. It's not going to benefit you by knowing that information. In fact, it's probably negative and going to make you feel worse. Angel, hey, Marlo, what's going on, man? Long time no see. Good to see you're still alive, and good to stay in touch too. Marlo, we're talking about, you know me well already at this point. We're talking about biohacking that really works and doesn't require medical drugs or peptides or steroids or any of that BS, Basically talking about how to be healthy and happy. And that's it. It's a lost art in healthcare in the US. It's all like medical drug dealing basically at this point, and unnecessary surgeries. So regarding the news, you guys, unless you're going to take action, you're literally just wasting your time. And if you're watching the news 10 hours a week, I would rather you invest that 10 hours into your mental and physical health goals, and that would benefit you so much. Especially, like I mentioned, 85% of Americans right now are overweight, or 70% are straight up obese, and pretty much everyone is on medical drugs. I would rather you focus all of your energy on getting out of that state of pathology. Now that will benefit you so much. It will make you happier. It will increase your self-esteem because you're looking better, you're feeling better, your sex drive is higher, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's so many benefits. There's like literally no benefits on following the news. Unless you're going to be like a billionaire or become a politician, or, start a terrorist organization or whatever, no one's going to listen to you. And you're probably not going to take any action. Your attention should be spent on just taking care of your mental and physical health goals. If that's already not taken care of, that should be the top priority. Because it doesn't matter whether, I don't care like what your goals are in life. You could be like a computer science guy, or you want to be an inventor or a president of a company or whatever, or a doctor. You're going to need your mental and physical health to accomplish anything worth accomplishing. How are you going to accomplish something worth accomplishing if you have like major depression or debilitating back pain or debilitating and chronic digestive issues, which are extremely common in America? I think 45% of people, last time I checked, have chronic lifelong digestive issues, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where your attention should be spent. If you're on medical drugs, you got to figure out how to be healthy enough to stop being on those medical drugs, and you got to stop lying to yourself and be honest about what you're doing to cause, your high blood pressure or your depression. or your high triglyceride levels or low HDL or low testosterone. These things aren't like genetic. You know what I mean? They're not. Yes, your parents had it, sure, but that's because they've normalized the same level of pathology you're normalizing. You picked up a belief system and certain behavior patterns from them that you replicate, and thus you develop the same health issues, et cetera, et cetera. If you look, go on PubMed.gov, even something as simple as depression. People still think it's like a chemical imbalance that is causing their depression, and this has been disproven so long ago. You can go to PubMed.gov, which is a resource that your doctors have. This is where they get all their studies from to make a decision on what to do with your health. You have access to all of this for free as well. And you won't find anything. You won't find anything promising that shows that, because certain neurotransmitters in your brain are ABC, and that's what's causing your depression. It's not the case, okay? A simple thing about depression, I'm going to actually planning on doing a live on it pretty soon because it's such a common problem in the US. Depression is kind of like, having unmet needs for prolonged periods of time. Anger turned inwards. Digestive issues lead to depression as well because a lot of your neurotransmitters, I think 90% of your serotonin is developed in your gut. Lack of physical activity, being too embedded in the unnatural ways of industrial society, et cetera, et cetera. These are the things to focus on when a person is depressed and to fix at that level, among a couple of other things, okay? But when you show up to, your local psychiatrist or family physician and you tell them like, hey, I'm depressed, they're like, well, don't focus on all these things. Let's just kind of throw some SSRIs at you and good luck, but what do you think is going to make you happy? Or decrease your depression, probably dealing with all of that stuff, although it may be a bit difficult depending on which stage of the journey you're in, but that's all that's going to work, because usually what I see with people with depression is they get on some SSRIs, it works initially, and then they kind of flatline and they have to up the dose, and it works initially, and then they flatline, and then now you're on 2 antidepressants, and now you're on 3, 4, 5, 6, et cetera, and still depressed. I've had, unfortunately, a few of my friends, kill themselves because of depression. So it's a very, very serious problem, but it needs to be approached in a multidimensional manner, in an integrated manner, not just throwing drugs at the person and not doing much else, So, so that's biohacking number 1. Again, doesn't require expensive supplements. I'm trying to help you guys give you actual answers that work. Doesn't require expensive supplements, no stupid peptides from China, no silly steroids from your favorite druggy influencer on Instagram, stuff of this sort. So social media, in short, delete it from your phone, but keep it on your laptop, if you like to stay connected with people. That will decrease your usage a tremendous amount. And then news, I would suggest just get rid of the news altogether. You guys, come on. Your time could be way better spent, especially like I mentioned, if you're having metabolic issues, if you're on if you're on medical drugs, if you're overweight, even if you're looking for love life, someone to partner up with. I would rather you focus on that. Find that person, get your body composition on point. Get healthy enough to, deal with the underlying issues to get off your blood pressure meds, to get off your antidepressants, which will make it also easier for you to find a healthy partner, because like attracts like. If you're in a sick and diseased state, you're going to attract that, stuff of that sort. So by just taking out the news, taking out social media, that should free up bare minimum 10 hours a week, if not more, usually probably 15 or 20 hours a week. That's such a gargantuous amount of time. And again, all you need to look your best, feel your best, not be on any nasty medical drugs is about 10 hours a week. That's it. So it's not asking for too much. So that's biohacking 1. No cost. Anyone can do it. Even if you don't have a college education, that's okay. Anyone can do biohacking step 1 that I covered, okay? Step 2, we kind of covered a little bit in step one, is learn to get healthy enough to not be on so many medical drugs. You know, like if you're on blood pressure, high blood pressure medication, that one's, I would say from my experience, clinical experience of 21 plus years, so easy to get off of. It's so easy. High blood pressure, hypertension, too much tension. You know, you work on decreasing the tension in the person's life. You get them on a light workout routine. You know, you get their body composition on point. A lot of times people think these are like genetics. You know, I have high blood pressure because of my genetics. Sometimes maybe 1 out of every 700, 1 out of every 600 people has chronic hypertension for one reason or another. But everyone else, they're just living so out of alignment with their natural state. You know, you guys have to remember that the central nervous system, you think this is you, but really you are like your brain, you know, and your spinal cord and all the nerves that go from it. That's you. And this is kind of like some suit that your central nervous system uses to help survive better in the external world. That central nervous system, which is encased in your skull and never sees the external world, still thinks you're some caveman that's living in some cave and eats berries from time to time, you know, and goes hunting. You know, it hasn't changed in 250,000 years. So of course it needs to be more aligned with its natural form of evolution. Just unfortunately, industrial society has changed. Here's your central nervous system, here's industrial society, you know? And that discrepancy leads to a lot of maladaptive behavior because people can't keep up with the pace of society. A lot of people, you know, with it'd be like inflation and or constant industry changes, you know, whatever, you know what I mean? And stuff of this sort. And then combined with people being so unhealthy, so chronically inflamed on so many medical drugs, which, remember, these drugs work because they're very potent. They work, I say that very lightly, of course. They're very potent, but you have to remember the human body is composed of 12 systems. And when you start altering one through medical drug use, it has an impact, an unknown impact on all 12. So for example, with antidepressants, there is a study, go to pubmed.gov, that evaluated medical drug use and its impact on the digestive system. And this is a retrospective study. It's a very good study. And they tested the gut microbiome of people that stopped using medical drugs like many years ago, or quite a long time ago, okay? So the study number is 40, 91, 07, 78. Again, pubmed.gov. You guys have access to all of these resources that your doctor does, which they use to come up with a solution for you. So just go there, check it, okay? And in terms of the reference of what I'm saying here is they found that antidepressants had a similar impact on your digestive system as broad spectrum antibiotics. So imagine, you know, antibiotics are used for like very short periods of time, usually a week or two. Like for H. pylori, it's like 2 weeks or something like that. It's like bacterial infection of the stomach. That's very common. But people use antidepressants for like decades. So you could only imagine like what is going on in their digestive system after decades of use of these psychiatric drugs. And people think it's just like when they take it, they're not educated on the fact that they think it's like, oh, it's just changing my brain chemistry. No, it's changing your whole entire chemistry, period, biochemistry, altogether. Because once you alter one system, like this study indicates, you know, people that use antidepressants long-term exhibit similar gut microbiome changes as people that are broad spectrum antibiotics, et cetera, et cetera. And then obviously as you start altering the keystone species in your gut, that's going to have, depending on, you know, which ones go down and which ones go up, that's going to have various health implications as well, especially on how you're digesting and breaking down nutrients, which will also lead to various health complications and stuff of this sort. So get healthy enough to not need to be on any medical drugs, okay? Healthy and happy, that's the goal. And it is a longer journey. It's a more honest journey, but it's what's also going to make you at the end of the day more healthy and happy. Because like I mentioned, with the antidepressants, most likely not having your needs met for prolonged periods of time. You probably have some internal dialogue that's leading you to turn anger inwards. Digestive system, especially if you're maybe using antidepressants for a long period of time, not knowing how to take care of your biology properly. All these things are kind of leading to your depression. Having love-hate relationships in your life or story gaps, etc., etc. A highly inflammatory diet, all that stuff. So that's biohacking number 2 that actually works, okay? And we're just covering stuff that works here. Again, don't need any medical drugs for this, no peptides, no druggy influencers on Instagram, just stuff that works. And this stuff isn't promoted heavily because pills pay the bills, guys. Pills pay the bills. That's why everyone's trying to push pills, push anything but just actual real healthcare. So another biohacking trick that actually will do wonders for you is work on optimizing your body composition. And what I mean by this is have a respectable body fat range. So for males, it's somewhere between 10 or 12%, depending on your goal, of course. And try to put on as much muscle as possible. And again, depending on your goals, on top of that 10 or 12% body fat. So right now, like I mentioned, 70% of Americans are obese, not overweight, obese. And 85% are either overweight or obese. So let's just round up a little bit. We'll say 90%. So if you're in this 90%, your first goal is to get your body fat down to 10 or 12%. I would get a DEXA scan if you want to be very precise. They offer those pretty much in every major city at this point. Or you could just kind of look at yourself in the mirror, and if you have, let's say, like an inch of belly fat protruding below your belly button, you're like at 20%, so it's overweight for a male. If it's like more than an inch and a half, you're probably at 25+%, which is obese for a male. So 20% is overweight for a male, 25% is obese. And 90% of people are in that, 90% of males in the US are in that range. And this is a difficult subject, and this is a very problem unaware subject as well. I get a lot of males coming in thinking they need to lose just a few pounds, but really they're just very overweight. But just the issue is the people working next to them at work are just so much more overweight, so they think they're much leaner than they are. But it's not the case, so they need to be taken from the problem unaware stage to the problem aware stage and say like, hey, I know you're very lean looking compared to, the people at your office, but you're at 20%. So that's overweight. Again, if you have like an inch below your belly button, it's already like 20% minimum, okay? If not more. If it's like an inch and a half, you're already obese. So your first goal is to get you down to 10 or 12%. And then once you get there, try to be on a good hypertrophy program. Undulating periodization is great. And try to put on as much muscle as possible on top of that leaner frame. And that body composition will help you remain aesthetically appealing into your older age, because muscle loss as you age is what gets you to look old, like a melted ice cream cone. And also, this is already way down the line, but in your 70s, for example, especially loss of muscle mass in your glutes, your core, your rector spinae muscles, your pelvic floor muscles, and your legs is what get you to lose your independence. And then you got to have a nurse freaking wipe your butt, because you can't do anything. But these things are so easily avoidable. If you just start early, be consistent, be safe, and approach health and wellness from wanting to be happy and healthy instead of medically drugged out and on a bunch of peptides and steroids, which is what US healthcare is promoting these days. Just pills, supplements, medical drugs, steroids, local druggy influencer, steroids, whatever. It's this is why no one's getting better, because people actually listen to these people for health advice, where this is actually how you get better. And I didn't make this stuff up, you know. I mean, this is just like super common sense that has, again, it's like a lost art, you know. No one's teaching anyone how to be healthy anymore. They're just trying to medically drug them to death and hope for the best. So with training, you know, I would recommend personally staying away from high intensity training like CrossFit, Hydrox. I don't know what kind of trendy bullshit is out there these days. Just stick to the basics, guys. Stay away from these stupid gimmicky training systems. If you take a basic course on kinesiology, you'll see like that's not how you train a human body in a healthy way. And avoid long distance cardio or high intensity cardio. Walking is great, you know, do a lot of walking, but avoid any like running, especially on concrete, or any like long distance cardiovascular activities. Okay. Fourth, biohack. Again, no medical drugs required. You don't have to medically drug yourself out. Use a sauna. Easy. Most people have access to this. If you want, you could even buy a sauna unit for like $2,000 to $3,000, like a single person unit in your house. And this is a great way of getting rid of a lot of estrogenic chemicals in your body and just sweating out a lot of chemicals in general. And it's very easy to do. It's good for your skin complexion. I personally like steam rooms a little bit better for skin complexion because I find that they put a lot more moisture back into your skin. So they give you that nice glow, you know, especially I usually find it more than enough to use it once a week. But if you do it like on Wednesday, for example, and on Sunday, for example, like your skin's like looking amazing pretty much all week. And it's good for like cleaning out your pores. Make sure to obviously stay very well hydrated when you're doing that stuff, and kind of best advice is to always gradually get into it. You know, so if you're not used to that heat, maybe just stay in for 5 minutes for a few weeks and then go to 10 minutes for a few weeks, you know what I mean? It's et cetera, and then figure out a good tempo or a good amount of reps that will work well for you. But this is so easy to do and like no cost, and it's good for your health too, good for your aesthetics, et cetera, good for getting rid of those estrogenic chemicals and just not having a large toxic buildup in your body, because you know, the average newborn born in a metropolitan area these days is born with already trace amounts of about 120 different chemicals in their bloodstream. So the toxic load in a typical American is super high, very, very high. And this is inevitably very dangerous because a lot of these chemicals, especially unknowingly, the cocktail, all of these chemicals, which oftentimes create a synergistic effect. So like 1 + 1 all of a sudden equals 10 instead of 2, increase your chances of all sorts of cancers. And 50% of Americans develop cancer in their lifetime and half die from it. And I know, just like with blood pressure and triglycerides and cholesterol and body fat, people still foolishly think it's like genetics. Like, well, my parents had it, you know what I mean? Yes, they had it. And you copied their belief system and behavior patterns, and now you have it too. So how it worked with cancer is initially they thought it was like all genetics for the most part. And then they're like, well, you know, it's like 50% genetics. And then now it's like 80% genetics. And now it's becoming very obvious that the bulk majority of cancers are simply lifestyle and diet oriented. So when you combine like a high body fat, chronically high body fat percentage with a lot of stress, low grade chronic stress even, which goes discounted these days, and I'll explain how that's so important to understand, and high toxic load, people eating God knows how much processed food, factory farm meats, crops that are sprayed with God knows how many herbicides, fungicides, pesticides, rodenticides, whatever, et cetera. All of these things combined increase the chance of cancer by quite a bit, okay? And I would say the bulk majority of people fall into that category of being chronically overweight for many, many, many years, if not decades, and not even thinking they're overweight, but they are. High toxic load from processed food, eating out often, not having a filter for your water, eating factory farmed meats, et cetera, and very stressful lifestyle. Especially these days, a lot of people don't understand that the central nervous system doesn't do well under low-grade chronic stress. They're always worried about these big stressors, which a lot of people have too. But the thing that really destroys your central nervous system are these kind of little things, but when they're stacked upon each other. So like, a typical person getting up, let's say at 6 a.m., not well rested, which is already going to spike your cortisol a bit. Gets some coffee, spikes cortisol more. Gets on the freeway. It's very taxing on the central nervous system and stressful to be on the freeway. Gets to work. There's like a story gap at work. They don't like the work, but then on top of that, they have like some drama thing going on with their coworker, their annoying coworker. They just don't see eye to eye on them. Maybe like their boss doesn't understand nonviolent forms of communication, which creates a very tense and very like conditional environment. Then at lunch break, of course, they go buy their highly inflammatory foods that are cooked on all these industrial seed oils. They think they're eating healthy, but it's like totally bogus. You can't eat out and eat healthy. That's like BS. Get back into the office, more deadlines, get back on the freeway where they hit traffic on the way home again. A lot of people don't know, but even driving around on the freeway is quite stressful on the central nervous system. The amount of attention it has to put forward to stay in the lanes, look out for different cars coming and going, maybe pedestrians, etc., etc. I know this is so normal in our culture, but it's not normal on the central nervous system. It's actually quite stressful. Remember, like I mentioned before, your central nervous system still thinks you're some caveman in a dark cave that eats berries from time to time, okay? So you could imagine how many standard deviations away you are from that lifestyle, and then wondering when you're chronically stressed why it's so hard to heal, why it's aging you so quickly, etc., etc., okay? So sauna, another biohack. I know, not fancy, but it doesn't require medical drugs. And it actually gets you one step closer to being healthy, okay? Another big thing, biohack that actually works is you could rewild your diet, okay? What do I mean by that? So there are a few things. So let's just break it down piece by piece. Like with meats, if you want to go to the extreme, the apex, you could eat elk, deer, wild boar, wild fish, Wild fish is easy to find in most supermarkets, pretty much all supermarkets, especially like sockeye salmon, cod, pink salmon, things of that sort, okay? For elk and deer, there's a company called, you could get into hunting, but that's very time intensive and probably not going to be realistic for most people. But there are websites like Force of Nature Meats. You can Google them, and they sell elk and deer. And you can just buy it from them. And they sell wild boar from Texas as well, etc., etc. And then you could just, it's going to be very tough to forage, but the next step back from there is you could just start buying organic fruits and vegetables at your local grocery store. I like buying those frozen usually, and kind of with the vegetables, cooking it in a stew, and with the fruit, kind of blending it with some a mix of nuts and seeds, just to have that diversity of fiber, which is good for your keystone species as well. You want at least like 30 or 40 different sources of fiber per week in your diet. You want to kind of ideally cycle that through the seasons. So those keystone species remain very balanced and healthy in your gut, And that's it. You've rewilded your diet, You could also eat farmed animals, but that are fed a species-specific diet. So like chicken, that's ideally not vegetarian fed. So vegetarian fed, it just means grain fed, but chickens are omnivores, so they like eating bugs, insects, etc., etc., and they can eat other stuff as well, just like omnivores can eat a diverse diet also. But when they're vegetarian fed, they're just heavily grain fed. And usually it's just corn and soy, like heavy amounts of corn and soy, and typically genetically modified corn and soy that are typically grown with a herbicide called Roundup ready, you know? So typically, I'm using typically a lot today. A genetically modified crop is genetically modified to resist a certain biocide. In this case, with our conversation, a herbicide, Roundup Ready, with its active ingredient, glyphosate. And this is the business model. They're sold, these seeds, these genetically modified seeds are sold to the farmer. And basically it's then a subscription model. You know, they have to keep ordering these chemicals to grow these seeds, et cetera, et cetera. And the seeds are genetically modified to resist this herbicide. So when they spray the herbicide on the crop, it kills everything around it but the crop, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But then you get a lot of this residue because it's systemic. You know, a lot of people are like, well, just wash your vegetables or fruit. But the problem is a lot of these biocides, most of them are systemic. So they get soaked up by the root of the crop and then become part of the nutritional profile of that fruit and vegetable. In this case, the corn and soy that the chickens eat, and then whatever they eat, you know, becomes part of their nutritional profile that you end up eating. And in fact, it typically bioaccumulates in animals, usually in their fat tissue, but to a smaller extent in their muscle and organ tissue as well, et cetera, et cetera. So when you transition to eating animals that are fed a species-specific diet, they're less exposed to a lot of these grains, especially if you're getting it from like an organic source. So with cattle, their species-specific diet is that of a herbivore. So they eat various forage, like on grass. You know, you've probably seen pictures of cattle roaming on the pasture. And that's what optimizes their nutritional profile. In particular, their omega-3 to omega-6. Omega-3, it's like an anti-inflammatory micronutrient. Omega-6, it's an inflammatory micronutrient. It's found typically in the shell of a grain. You know, so both of these are required. There's an omega-9 as well for healthy living. But the problem is once these ratios become displaced. So typically, you know, in factory farm meats that are exposed to a gargantuous amount of corn and soy, like vegetarian fed chicken, you're going to get a very high omega-6 to a very low omega-3 profile. And of course, this will make the food more pro-inflammatory. And then you combine that with the individual using a lot of cooking seed oils, eating a lot of processed food, et cetera, et cetera. And all of a sudden, their omega-6 in their body is very, very high. You know, so they have, and they combine with a stressful lifestyle, high body fat percentage, et cetera, and all of a sudden they have like chronic inflammation all the time on full blast. And if you look up inflammation theory of disease, you'll see that all disease, including all cancers, its base foundation is chronic inflammation. That's what gets the ball rolling, you know? So by doing this biohack and rewilding your diet, if you're eating wild game, you know, like elk, deer, wild boar, wild fish, the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio is already even. It's like 1-to-1. That's kind of roughly what you want to look for, okay? And it's already done as a default because in nature, this is just how food is. But once you start getting industry involved, once you start getting humans involved and economics, et cetera, they start relying on a lot of these grains. Because it's, first of all, in the US, it's subsidized, you know, so it's paid for by the taxpayer. And in terms of meat operations, the biggest expense, 80% of the expense is the feed to the animal. So if it's subsidized, it decreases the expenses for the farmer by a tremendous amount. So they're more inclined to do that, you know what I mean? And stuff of this sort. So there's a lot that goes into that, but that's one of the biohacks that will do a tremendous amount of benefits for you, okay? And again, doesn't require medical drugs, stupid supplements, like stupid peptides, nothing, okay? So you guys also have to remember that the human digestive system has spent quite a long time. You know, the world has been around for, I think, like 4 billion years. Last time I checked, I don't know if there are any new findings. And the human digestive system, and you guys remember, there have been 28 plus human species that have come and gone. So we're not like the only ones. We're the only ones remaining. But there have been many that have been around, including the Neanderthal, which are no longer around. You know, they're around for about 200,000 years and now they're completely gone. But there are other 28 human species that are just vanished. Some have been around for a very, very long time, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years, maybe a million years, and then boom, gone. And there have been like 4 mass extinctions as well throughout the Earth's lifespan that have pretty much killed everything during each of those mass extinctions. And you have to remember the soil composition evolved, or the human digestive system evolved in tandem with the soil composition to recognize the food that comes from there. You know what I mean? The crops, etc. And then the animals that eat those crops and then go back into the soil once they die and then are basically eaten away by these same crops. Crops are actually omnivores, they're not vegetarians. This bacteria and fungi kind of breaks down the animal, and then those roots soak up the nutrients from that dead animal, and it becomes part of the nutritional profile of the crop. And then another animal eats it, and you can see it's an enclosed ecosystem. You know, so it's important to eat food that has evolved, that comes from the healthy soil on top of that, but that is actually real food. And a lot of people, and I know this is one of those subjects where it's like everyone and their grandmother thinks they know what healthy eating is, but it's so abysmally delusional at this point. It's kind of very disheartening to hear when I see a person that's on a bunch of medical drugs and very overweight, like tell me they know anything about healthy eating. They don't, because they wouldn't be that way, obviously, you know, because this is such a pivotal, important part to maintaining your health. It's one of those main pillars. There are many parts to the puzzle, but you know, your dietary choices are literally the biggest impact. You know, once you take out self-sabotage from the equation, that's like literally the biggest impact to your health if you get that one right. So that biohack is probably like a big player in our conversation today. So on the other hand, another biohack you can do is just decrease your exposure to like pesticides, biocides, herbicides, fungicides, rodenticides, et cetera, et cetera. And these days, unfortunately, you're not going to get it down to 0, but you could decrease it a tremendous amount. And don't think these pesticides are tested for safety in the US. They're not tested as a complete formulation for safety. I know there are a lot of MD and dietitian influencers that are saying, just buy this factory farm food, it's completely okay. You know, don't get this organic food, it's not worth it. So these are like very sick people that look at paper and they never actually, you know, went out into the wilderness, studied forestry, studied any farming practice, especially biodynamic farming practices, how to optimize soil composition, et cetera, et cetera. So they don't know, and they're oftentimes very, very sick themselves. Notice they're not looking good, you know, which is a symptom of not being well. And obviously, sick people can't make healthy decisions, or they wouldn't be sick to begin with. So if you're listening to these people, you're going to find yourself sick as well. And a lot of them say like, oh, pesticides are safe, tested for safety thoroughly. My challenge for you guys, and please do this, direct message them and ask them for a single study that tests a complete formulation for safety on any pesticides, any herbicide, any fungicide, any biocide altogether. And they may send you stuff, but if you read it, you'll see that they're not testing the complete formulation. They're just testing the active ingredient in isolation on its own. And that's it. And that's never how it's used out in the field, ever. You know, testing the active ingredient in a chemical formulation, you guys, in short, you have 2 main categories of ingredients. One is the active ingredient. That one is the main ingredient, but it could also be a very small part of the entire formulation. So it could be like 0.5%, like in atrazine, or maybe up to 40 or 50%, like in Roundup Ready products. Okay? But then you have like a myriad, usually a proprietary blend, that they never release out to the public. You'll never be able to get this information as a consumer, of a myriad of inert ingredients. And these inert ingredients are put in place to make the active ingredient much more deadly and persistent in the environment in one way or another. Okay? So without those inert ingredients, the active ingredient is fairly weak, like in Roundup Ready, which is a blockbuster herbicide. It's makes billions, now facing billions of dollars worth of lawsuits. Glyphosate is the active ingredients. It's like 40 to 50% of the different formulation. And take note that with Roundup Ready products, there are hundreds of different types of formulations too, which makes it a little bit more confusing. But glyphosate is the active ingredient, okay? It's actually a fairly weak herbicide in isolation, which is how it's tested. But then when you throw those inert ingredients into the mix, it all of a sudden becomes super deadly. You can kind of just throw a mist of this stuff on weeds and the weeds die, you know? So not tested for safety. If they send you anything, read it. Hopefully you guys just read it and you'll see they're testing the active ingredient in isolation and never the complete formulation. And also take note, this is so critically important, that in farming practices, they never just use one formulation, complete formulation. They use many, and they typically put them in the same bucket. They mix it all because it makes it more powerful. So now you have these huge synergistic effects that they're spraying on these crops, and then you're eating it. So common sense. You guys, if I have an apple here and I spray a synthetic herbicide on this guy, and I have an apple here and I spray an organic, like say biocide. So like organic biocides are like salt and water, you know, salt, like the stuff you put on your food, or soap and water. Soap is the stuff you wash with, you know, or vinegar and water. Vinegar, you know, you can clean stuff with or put it on your vegetables, etc., etc. Those are all organic biocides. Like, what would you rather have on that apple? Vinegar and water, or Roundup Ready, which is facing billions of dollars of lawsuits for causing cancers in various people, you know? So you guys have to be mindful of this, you know what I mean? In order to make good dietary practices. So reduce your exposure to pesticides, and you do that, or biocides, and you do that by simply, the first easy step for most people is just to shop USDA organic initially, okay? It's not like the final stage, but it's a great step in the right direction. And then you can kind of go more towards rewilding your diet, like I mentioned before, and I did a whole nother podcast on it as well. So some pushback people claim are like, oh, you know, it's a little bit more expensive, etc., etc. It's like totally not more expensive. Like the average American spends like $8,000 to $16,000 a year on like total bullshit that's just adding to their obesity, misery, and disease. Like no less than 8,000, even in poverty-stricken areas. These non-essential expenses are like eating out, alcohol, subscription services, like super bullshit, like sugar highs, no real value to your life whatsoever kind of purchases. And, you know, a 2,000 calorie a day USDA organic diet is around, you know, $7,000 or $8,000 a year these days. So that money is already being spent. It's just being spent on fueling your mental and physical pathology. And you need to divert those funds to more health conscious practices. So the money is definitely 100% being spent on fueling mental and physical illness. So you just need to be mindful of that and stop fueling the mental and physical illness and start fueling more of a health-centered lifestyle, a more sustainable lifestyle. And giving the right companies money too, you know? So next biohack, and this kind of goes with the pesticides, is buy a filter, buy a water filter. So ideally you want to be drinking somewhere around 2 to 3 liters of filtered, like well-filtered water per day. If you are in a place where you're not going to be moving, you can buy like a reverse osmosis unit, you know? Ideally like a couple of stages with a remineralization unit as well. Water Drop is a great company to purchase from. Very credible company. And I would recommend purchasing these units at like credible store like Costco or Home Depot or Sam's Club. I would recommend, unless you're buying it directly from that company's website, not purchasing it on like third-party distributors, because there are a lot of knockoffs and counterfeits, etc., etc. that NSF certified components, especially if multiple components in the unit or all the components in the unit are certified, that's always a great sign too. But that is critically important. Or like a countertop filter, such as like a Berkey, for example. There are many variations of countertop filters. Usually use a carbon filter, and you can get like a fluoride and arsenic filter attached to it as well. But that's another option that's a little bit more flexible and mobile than the reverse osmosis unit. The plus side of the reverse osmosis unit is it pretty much gets rid of literally everything. So you don't have that gargantuous amount of industrial chemicals and chlorine and pesticides. Chlorine, a lot of people don't know, is actually a very, very dangerous pesticide. So you don't want to be drinking that stuff all the time, because that's going to disrupt that delicate ecosystem in your gut microbiome and thus disrupt your keystone species, okay? So getting a filter is another great biohack that actually works to improve your looks, your health, your metabolic health, whatever, all right? And water is critically important too, because typically you're consuming quite a bit of it, so you need to be wise about your sourcing. And also, it's the most important nutrient for the human body and for human health. It fuels pretty much 99% of your cell volume is like water, for example. Okay, so 2 more things, and then I got to get going, guys. Number 8, a good biohack that's very inexpensive, it might cost you a little teeny bit, is just to get in the habit of reading more. If you're having health issues, if you're having financial issues, you can become, to a degree, your own mechanic. Eventually you'll realize you're going to have to hire a mentor anyways, because it's kind of naive to think you can solve all world problems on your own. And there's like, few people can do it, but very few people can overcome the belief system that led to their problems and use that same belief system to lead to a solution for that same problem. It just doesn't work. And usually they need a third party, really good, credible mentor to help them saturate whatever mind virus they have going on that's leading to their pathology, whether it's like physical or mental pathology or financial issues or whatever. That's the best way, but reading, I have my books right over there. And I give a lot of them away to the library once I'm done, is a great way to expand your knowledge and your ability to solve problems and survive better in the external world. These books, you can buy them used on Amazon. It's so cheap, it's like $1, $2, whatever. And it's an amazing resource, because the author of any of these books, I guarantee you, spent their whole entire life trying to write this one book, accumulating that kind of knowledge. And you could, in a sense, sit there with them and learn all of that knowledge in a very fast-tracked way and being able to apply it, So if you read just 20 pages a day, like before you go to sleep, that's about usually like 1.5 to 2 books a month. So like maybe 12 to 24 books a year. So you can imagine the type of knowledge and the benefit you'll accumulate year after year by doing that. And it usually takes, I don't know, at least me, like maybe 40 minutes to read 20 pages or so. So depending on your reading speed. That's another easy biohack that is a huge, huge, huge life upgrade. And will also honestly probably make you a lot more of an interesting person, because you'll have more cool stuff to talk about. And like I mentioned, it'll get you to solve problems better, especially if you have a diverse education, because it helps you to see a specific problem from multiple vantage points. And even if you don't know a specific solution from a certain vantage point, you at least know that it is something worth looking into, and you may hire someone to help you in that particular aspect. But if you're totally clueless and oblivious, because you're spending a lot of time on social media and stuff of this sort and just consuming just irrelevant content like the news, you're not going to see this broader picture and to see an honest solution. That's why a lot of people are on medical drugs, because they don't see this broader system, like with the depression I mentioned. They just think it's a chemical imbalance. Well, go to PubMed.gov and find a single study that proves that. that your depression is solely due to a chemical imbalance. If they read books, mastered psychology, cognitive behavior therapy, maybe even quantum psychology, which is something I really like, they'll see depression. It needs to be a multidimensional process, dealing with a person's unmet needs, anger turned inwards, digestive issues, not using their body enough, not using movement as medicine enough in their lifetime, among various other things like story gaps, love-hate relationships, etc., etc. But if they didn't know any of this stuff and they go to the doctors and the doctors are like, here, just take these SSRIs, what more do they know? They don't know, So, which is why they're on more and more medical drugs and never get better and seem to look worse and feel worse year after year. So, ninth, biohack. Guys, I need to meet with some friends pretty soon. Ninth, biohack, and this one is so powerful and so cheap, but so tough. You just got to stop lying to yourself if you want honest change. And that's it. That sets the foundation of honest change. Once you stop lying to yourself, once you stop saying it's my genetics, it's out of control, like it's out of my control, like it's a chemical imbalance, it's my family, whatever. Stop lying to yourself and you'll start getting more honest answers that are really going to help you, although it may be very tough initially. And seeking the right type of help too. That's like one of the most potent biohacks you can do. Just stop lying to yourself. So, okay, you guys, I hope that helped. I'm going to run off here. I want to wish you guys the best this weekend, okay? And wishing you guys all the best. Take care.